Aloha. I've never had the opportunity to introduce my husband before, so this is thrilling for me because he's awesome. He is presently a bishop, a father of 9 children, and a wonderful corporate educator. He didn't start out that way. He started out as Dennis Deaton, and he became a dentist, and he was a dentist for 13 years, and then felt inspired that he needed to use a gift that he had, a gift of speaking and teaching. And so he has used that throughout the world as a corporate educator. He has influenced many thousands of people, and I hope you'll enjoy his influence here today.
Aloha from Arizona. It's really great to be here. I've just been basking in your spirit for the last few days. I was at the PCC last night. I feel the Spirit of the Lord here in great power. I know that you are special, chosen vessels that have been invited here by the Spirit from around the world to meet one another, make connections. Most of all, make deeper connections with knowledge and with the Spirit of God. I feel very humbled to have a minor moment in your life to share some important ideas, and I'd like to proceed with that. I want you to know that being a professional speaker, that I know that ordinarily what I'm supposed to do is tell you a very funny, heartwarming story to put you at ease and maybe even myself at ease. But we have such a short amount of time. I want you to all imagine that I told you a very funny and heartwarming story and that you really liked it. I can see that didn't work too well. So let me just say to you that I learned a long time ago in my life that there's only one teacher ultimately on the earth, and that is the Holy Ghost. And I'm earnestly seeking and interested in your faith and prayers to guide me here. You'll notice that I'm ahead of one here just a moment. The title of the message here is Visioneering, Seeing the Creation Before It's Created. And we all know that the way this dispensation started was with a first vision. And with that beginning, all that has ensued has been an effort upon inspired leaders to first see where we're going and then lead us there. Now, I'd like to set the stage here. I'm going to actually give you a little taste of the way we approach corporate training. In our company, we say that business doesn't get better until people do. And people don't get better until they're able to take responsibility for their own thought processes. Everything we do first in our minds. Every word, every gesture, every response to any situation is first created in our thoughts, and then it is translated in our bodies into working reality. Now, Joseph Smith received light and knowledge. It was not dictated verbally to him. The Lord did not say, "Behold, comma, capital B-E-H, Joseph received light knowledge." And then it was his responsibility to translate that into a vocabulary so that he could share what he'd understood in the Spirit. Now, I'm sure that some of you have already had this experience. You've received answers to prayers. You've had feelings come to you, and you sense them, and you get an understanding, and then when you want to explain it to someone else, you're really fighting to try to find vocabulary. So Joseph knew within a reasonable amount of time when he was going to be offered up. He prophesied that he would give his life for the dispensation. His testimony would seal with his own blood. And in the spring of 1844, Joseph is trying to pour out to the saints as much knowledge as he can because he knows his time is short. And in two very wonderful discourses, he focuses on trying to get us to understand who we are in our very fundamental essence. Because if we understand that, then we're able to proceed forward to fulfill the measure of our creation more effectively. So I'd like to just take you to one of those talks. And Joseph is fighting to find the right vocabulary. The English language is a marvelous tool, but it also has its limitations. And so when Joseph understood certain concepts in such a way, he tried to find the closest language in English to express it, but sometimes he had to kind of redefine it to capture what he'd understood. So in the King Follett Discourse, Joseph starts off with a great equation these are terms that he's trying to put together to convey to us an important concept of who we are. He starts off and he says, the soul. And then that's not quite it for him. And then he says, the mind of man. And then that's not quite it. He says, the immortal spirit. Now those are terms he's using to try to put across to us our very essence. And then a little later on, just a couple of sentences later, he comes back, and then he comes back to the word the mind again. And then he says, the intelligence. And then he finally lights on the intelligence of spirit. Now, I like to think about this in the following terms. Now, when I teach in a corporation, I cannot quote Joseph Smith directly, although sometimes I do. And I want to tell you as a testimony to you that there are times when I borrow some language from the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, and I put it into my messages without giving credit to Joseph. And I'll go rattling along, and people will be interested and engaged, and then I will throw in a sentence from the prophet, and everybody you can just see them come to life, and they'll say that again, slow down, can you say that again? And it's such a testimony to me. Anyway, here's how I try to put this across even to small children. You and I have a body, but we're not our bodies. We have emotions, but we're not our emotions. We have feelings, but we're not our feelings. We're the selector of our feelings and emotions. We get to decide how we feel about any situation in any given moment. We get to decide what kind of emotion we're going to wrap around any experience. And essentially what we are is a thinker of thoughts. We are a thinker of thoughts inside our body, and what that thinker of thoughts chooses to think has everything to say about the quality of life that we live, the energy we bring to any adversity. Even the way we interpret the word adversity is factored into our mental equations. And so what I'd like to have you then consider then is this statement. I'll use a different method here. A statement, I guess, close that. Yes, I'll be happy to say it again. What do you want me to say again? Okay, yes. We have bodies, but we're not our bodies. When what Joseph was fighting to say here, the spirit, the soul, whatever you want to say, that living entity, it leaves this body, then the body is dead. Okay, the key characteristic of that entity, that spirit, is that it is a thinking entity that has the ability to think about its own thinking right in the process of thinking it. Don't you think that's an amazing property we have? Right in the middle of thinking a thought, I can analyze that thought. I can step out of that thought and I can ask myself, what is the destination of that thought? If I don't like that destination, what I do is I come back and change this thought, and I therefore am able to change my life. And there you see the statement by President Brigham Young, who said, the greatest mystery any of us will ever learn is how to master our thinker of thoughts, this entity, this intelligence of spirit that is our true self. Okay? Now, with that, Orson Pratt said that faith is not an abstract principle separate and distinct from the mind, but it is a certain condition or state of the mind itself. So what he's wanting to say here is that there are abstract principles or energies out here. If I were to hold this water bottle out here and I let go of it, it's going to fall to the earth because of the principle of the magnetic attraction of masses. That which is greater attracts that which is lesser, which has a wonderful spiritual symbol for all of us. The reason why a bounty towel, a bounty paper towel, is the quicker picker-upper is the principle of capillary attraction. Those are distinct outward principles. Now, faith is not an abstract principle that lives out here. It is a state of the mind. Okay? This thinker of thoughts can choose to exercise a state of confidence and trust, or it can choose to be filled with doubt. It can choose light and life, or darkness and death, really. And if I had more time, I'd try to give you a little bit more of an illustration, but maybe I can do that very quickly. I want you to picture a young woman about your age. When she was in high school, last year of high school, she was an athlete. Her name is Renee Riddle. The summer between her last year in high school and her first year in college, Renee Riddle was in a bit of a hurry getting from one activity to another, probably more of a hurry than she should have been. She loses control of the vehicle she's driving. It leaves the highway at high rates of speed, turns over several times. In a matter of a few tragic seconds, Renee Riddle's body was dramatically altered. She suffers a spinal injury at the 11th thoracic vertebra, meaning about mid-body. She said, it felt like a jolt of lightning went through my body. She says, I passed out from the pain. She says, I vaguely remember coming to awareness in the hospital in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. She says, I guess I was writhing in pain. They hit me with something pretty potent, and she says, I was out. She says, now I knew I was hurt. I knew I was hurt very badly. How permanently, how extensively, I didn't know. She said, I was in that coma for 4 days, and then I came out of that, and she says, my father happened to be the one sitting by the bed. It was the first face I saw. She said, Daddy, how bad is it? What have they said? Now, if you have that pictured in your mind, you now won't have much trouble at all picturing a fairly poignant conversation between a father and a once very athletic daughter that she's going to spend the rest of her life in a mechanized chair. Now, I saw that young woman respond in those early moments of this unexpected adversity with such grace and poise and faith. I don't know about you, but I want to be that kind of a person in my life. We've been promised one thing, that we were going to be tested. We're constantly going to have things come out of the blue that are going to seem to the world to be unfair, and maybe to us at that moment to be unfair. But we all cheered at one point in the pre-existence when we told we were going to be tried and we were going to be tested and we were going to go through some pretty severe things. And we cheered because we knew that that would be ways to refine our character, to help us to grow, to become like our celestial parents. That by overcoming by faith, we could gain the same characteristics, attributes, and traits of the gods. We could be like them. And we have now had this veil come over our mind so that we can't remember that. So when something comes along that's even a mild irritation, often we murmur. We complain. I think there's going to come a point when we're back on the other side of the veil and we see us complaining about some of the things we complain about, or we're going to be very embarrassed, chagrined. So Renee Riddle had a choice. She says, when they broke the news to me, she says, I saw that I could choose to create a great case for self-pity. Never quite accept the conditions, kind of whine and pine my way along life. But see, she's seeing that as a choice. She said, I saw that I could choose to create a great case for fury and bitterness. She said, I could be upset with God, furious with the universe. I'm only 18 years old. This isn't fair. She said, but the more I thought about those choices, and then the repercussions that would come out of those choices, she said, I saw that either one of those choices would only increase the damage that the accident could do to my life. And she said, I decided I wasn't going to go there. So here she is, a thinker of thoughts, with the ability to step out of her thinking and notice what she's thinking at that moment, and being able to watch that go forward to produce consequences. And when she sees those consequences and she doesn't like them, she doesn't go out and blame the world. She doesn't go out and try to sue somebody. She comes back here and she changes her thought processes, and then it changes her consequences out here. I'm doing terrible damage to your equipment here. Excuse me. I never get excited when I speak. I hope you've noticed that. That's sarcasm for some of you that don't know. Okay, never mind. So Renee saw that she could choose to accept this experience and even see it as a gift and be grateful for it. She said, I realized that not even my goals in life had to change. She said, the accident didn't change anything. She said, my life hadn't changed, just my body. Just my body? Are you kidding me? Can you think of anything that would just be constantly nagging into your thinking equations every waking minute? Anytime she moves her body in a room, goes from building to car to building, she'd always have those encumbrances begging her to go over into the why me, why do I have to put up with this kind of thinking? But she had seen this monumental thought that she gets to choose how she's going to respond to this. And she said, I realized that not even my goals in life had to change. She says, before the accident, I had three main goals. Number one, I wanted to be well educated. She said, I aspired to a master's degree in speech pathology so that, number two, I could work with hearing impaired children. She said, number three, at some point, I wanted to get married and have a child of my own. And she said, just because my back had been fractured, just because I was paralyzed in a good part of my body, it didn't mean that I couldn't at least strive for my goals. As you already suspect, I'm standing in front of you here in the year 2012 to say that Renee Riddle has done it all. Done it with flying colors, in my opinion. Took her more time, considerably more effort, but she got her bachelor's degree, she got her master's degree, and she is a tremendous inspiration to hearing impaired children. And I can tell you that from firsthand knowledge. One of Susie and I's children, Christian, was born profoundly deaf. He's not just hearing impaired, he's one of the profoundly deaf of the profoundly deaf. And sometimes the mountain he's been trying to climb seems a little taller than Everest. But every time he's had a conversation with Renee Riddle, he walks away from that conversation with his batteries charged up. He knows he can do his version of what she's doing. She's now Renee Riddle Moore. And a little over 10 years ago, she gave birth to a perfectly healthy baby boy, and said, I do not understand all the fretting about childbirth. I didn't feel a thing. Somebody told me her husband needed some anesthetic to get through his part. And I don't know what that was about. But anyway, with that case study, let me quickly share with you another. I know another young man. He grew up in the same relatively small town as Renee Riddle. They went to the same high school. I know that's true. There's only one in the town. At a boating activity at Lake Powell, he was jumping off a sandstone cliff of a height of about 40 or 50 feet, and he snapped his spine in the same location as Renee Riddle, and I'll keep it brief. I do not know a more unhappy, venom-filled, acrimony-spewing, upset, miserable human being. What's the difference? Their bodies are both injured in the same location. They grew up in the same culture. But the thinker of thoughts inside the young man's body is not choosing the noble thoughts that Renee Riddle's body, that she's thinking inside her body and getting the different results. So now with that, I want you to think about this great prerogative that you and I have to envision, to be actually be able to go forward and see the future in our mind's eye. The scriptures talk about our mind's eye. I have a couple of quick examples here. One of my favorite scriptures in the New Testament is the description of Moses in the chapter on faith. As you all know, Hebrews 11. Moses had a golden birthright. He was accepted as one of the princes of Egypt. You know that his Pharaoh's daughter found him floating in a basket in the Nile, took him in as her own. He's grown up. He's in wealth, opulent. He's one of the princes of Egypt. He's well educated. He's got all the things that money can buy. But it says in verse 24, he envisioned the reproach of Christ, greater riches than all of the wealth of Egypt, and visualizing that this life was not all there was, that there's a hereafter, that he's living not for this life, but for the world to come, he's able to reject the riches and do the will of the Lord out in the wilderness. And I don't know if anybody had a much harder priesthood assignment than Moses. I'm not a member of the church yet. William Glasser, but a very bright mind in field of psychology, says most people don't know. They're not aware. We're not really conscious of that we're motivated by pictures in our heads. Last night, when we were thinking of going to the fine dining at PCC, I started thinking about what I was going to eat. I didn't think of MEAT or FRUIT, I pictured a buffet. I saw a mental movie. Those of you that are athletes or artists, you know that you visualize, you run a mental movie of what you're going to live into. When in the time of Olympics, you see Olympians just before they're going to go out there and do their floor routine, or they're going to do their dive, or they're going to do their event. You don't see any of them reading a written goal. You see this faraway look in their eyes. Some of them have their eyes closed, and they're running this mental movie, and that's what is going to drive their behavior. That's the template of their behavior. Most people don't really realize how strongly we're motivated by pictures in our heads, and have no idea how powerful and specific they are. The power of pictures is total. When we change important pictures, we change our lives. Little wonder that the first principle of the gospel is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and to visualize his characteristics, perfections, and attributes. To ask ourselves, what would Jesus do in this situation? And we will see a picture in our mind of what Jesus would do, and then we live into that. Any of you that have perfected a golf swing, a baseball swing, where to block somebody in a rugby or soccer match, you've been using visioneering or visualization. Okay, so now we possess the incredible capability of constructing images in the present that can travel ahead in time to govern and create the future. You did that to get here to BYU, Hawaii. You visualized yourself coming here and are living into that. We're using it all the time. What you're wearing right now is something that you essentially visioneered in your closet when you got up this morning and seeing what was available and how you wanted to be, where you're going. You kind of picture that in advance. So, in the Book of Mormon, one of my favorite scriptures, in fact, if somebody told me you could only keep one chapter in the Book of Mormon, it would be Ether 12. I love Moroni's testimony about how the humility of Jesus as Jesus talked to him face to face. Now, he said that there were those who could not be kept from within the veil, but truly saw with their eyes. That's their visual imagination, their ability to picture the things which they beheld with an eye of faith. So let me quickly tell you a principle, and then we can talk about how we can use it, and I'm going to give you enough time for some question and answer. I served my mission in Italy. I was not then, I'm still not, a great student of the arts. Back then it was pathetic. All I could tell you about art was that it was short for Arthur, which gives you some idea where I was on a cultural spectrum. but living in Italy, and it was one grand mission there. I was one of the first missionaries to the nation of Italy when it was first opened. I lived in Florence, Italy, off and on for a total of 9 months. Now, there is a gallery in Italy that's famous. It's called the Accademia delle Arti. On a sunny Saturday morning, our P-days were on Saturday, Campagna and I are going down to the Accademia delle Arti. I didn't even take the time to read up what was there. I knew there was a bunch of famous stuff, and I just figured out when I got there. Walked into the first Gran Salone there, a room about this size, high vaulted ceilings, paintings of the masters on the wall, a few sculptures in the middle of the room. I went around, tried to appreciate those as best I could. Then I walked out of room A into room B. Now, the way they had room B set up is there were 2 sculptures, small sculptures, just outside the passageway from A to B, and they captured your attention. As I was walking towards those statues into the room B, I got the distinct feeling that most of room B was to my right, and that something very dramatic was happening at the other end of the room. And as I took my attention away from these 2 statues and turned to my right, I will never quite forget the visual impact of what I was looking at. It was this gigantic, enormous, white, gleaming tower of marble, which is commonly referred to as the David. No slide, no picture ever does it justice. For one thing, you can't appreciate its immensity. I'm 6 foot tall, right on the button. When I walk up to the David, my head comes to the top of the base, and then the David towers 16.5 feet above you. It is not just its immensity, it's exquisite, perfect, lifelike detail. You can see the tendons in the wrists and in the knees. You can see the veins in the feet. And all the while that's bombarding your senses, another part of your brain is telling you that somebody chipped it out of a rock. I don't know if you've ever actually taken a hammer and a chisel and struck marble with it. It's not a very forgiving substance. And how somebody could put that lifelike quality into it is just amazing to me. And there are times when you're standing there or sitting there just staring at the David, there's times when you could swear that it's breathing. So I did some research, and here's what I found. In 1501, the city-state of Florence had commissioned Michelangelo to create this giant statue. It had some political overtones to it. They gave him a lot of money to leave some of his current projects to the side and take on their project. When he accepts their commission, he says, I've got to start with an immense block of pristine quality, creamy white statuary marble. It needs to be as flawless as possible. One of his patrons immediately says to him, there is already here at Florence a huge block of creamy white color. Unfortunately, it is anything but flawless. So you need to know a little history of the block. 100 years before Michelangelo's time, just north of Pisa, west of Florence, there's an area called Carrara. There's still today 6 active marble quarries at Carrara. In the 1400s, apparently, somebody found a section of one of the mountains where there was a exceptionally large section of this white statuary marble, and they hewed that out of the mountain pretty much intact, drilled 4 holes in it so they could put axles through there and wheel it over to Florence. So it's got holes drilled through it. When it gets there, then there's more action taken upon it. A couple of lesser artists over the ensuing 100 years began shaping some kind of an initial project. Chunks were taken out of it, more holes drilled into it, and most people feel by the time it got down to Michelangelo that the block was botched and marred and would have to be subdivided and used for lesser pieces. But Michelangelo is intrigued. He said, let me see the block. They took him to the place where it was stored. They said he took physical measurements with tapes. And then they said the study really began. He assumed different postures around the block, trying to get an idea where the chunks, how deep they went, where the holes went. Get an idea of kind of almost the interior as much as he could see. And then eventually he got to a point where they say he just froze in front of the block. It's like his gaze was penetrating into the center of the stone itself. And then he looked up at his benefactor and he said, this is the block. The flaws do not cut through the figure in the stone. Now, is that meaningful to you? The sculptor can see the creation, before it's created. That David lives so vividly in his mind that he can project it into the stony reality of the marble. He can see the chunks. The holes are not going to wind up in the final product anyway. And that was his whole philosophy about sculpting. He says the figure already exists in the stone. It's my job as sculptor to see the figure, and then he called it liberate the captive within. Now that's not just a quaint story from art history. Every entrepreneur that I know, every high achiever, you name it, in athletics, in business, I believe in things spiritual. They see their creation, their future, the step where they're going. They see it with such vivid detail. The difference, I think, in between those who can persist and overcome obstacles is the vividness of their vision. I've had some business leaders that say, oh, this vision thing is overrated. Doesn't it come down to just good, hard work? That you've got to pay the price? And the answer to that is, of course, it's going to take good, hard work. But what causes one person to be willing to pay the price and do all that hard work and another one wimps out? It's the vividness of their vision. They want that vision so much that they'll sacrifice. They'll give up whatever it takes to have that vision. And that gives them the power to overcome discouragement, to persist when it gets hard and not quit. You ever wonder why Joseph could go through what he went through? Because he saw Zion. He saw a day when people of all races, countries, small islands, huge countries would come together, bringing the best of their cultures, and they would worship one God in spirit and in truth. One gospel. You're living that dream here. I have no doubt that Jesus Christ, Joseph Smith, they've seen you here. You might have seen them and not known they were who you were even passing on the campus here. Vision. What is your vision for your life? Do you picture you've been able to take on the same attributes and characteristics and perfections of Jesus Christ? Do you picture that you can persist in the face of persecution like Joseph? Do you picture that you can be as willing to give up the riches of the world for the riches of eternity like Moses? If that vision lives in your mind, you will surely do it. I remember so well in my mission field that there were some elders. This is back before they raised the bar. I'm so old, I don't think they even had a bar. But if you can believe this, there were some missionaries in our mission who had lurid magazines in their apartments. Now, when our mission president found out about that, he says, we're having a conference. We're going there. At a conference. And he said, elders, you do not know the power of what you're putting into your mind in terms of pictures. The advertising world knows this. Vivid, sensory-rich images influence behavior dramatically. He said, if you're to view that kind of material and keep pushing that into your mind and into your soul, he says, you do not have one chance in a million of serving an honorable mission, having the Spirit with you, and being able to go home and find the right partner and marry in the temple. Now, back in those days, when we went in the mission field, each one of us picked a temple of our preference, and we had the 13 Article of Faith on the back. It was kind of our business card back then. He asked each one of us to pull out our card and to look at our favorite temple. He said, I want you to look at that temple, and that someday you're going to be acquainted with the most wonderful person that you have ever met. Somebody you want to be with for time and all eternity. Somebody who brings out the best in you. He says, I want you to picture that in order for that marriage to be sealed, that you've got to be worthy of it. You've got to be pure and clean. He says, if you visualize that temple, picture inside that there's going to be a room with an altar in it. and that you're going to kneel across that altar with that person, and that you need to be clean and worthy so that she can be sealed to you forever, there's not one chance in a million that you'll go home disgraced. That picture will help you to overcome all temptation. So, brothers and sisters, I hope that there's been some principles that I've shared with you here that will resonate with you, that you'll think about creating a very specific mental movie of the steps in your life that are so important. Your temple marriage, your graduation from this university, your becoming a stalwart wherever you are in the world, in your land, to build up the church so that Zion may reign. Now we have a quarter. I have to be quiet here in 15 minutes. So I am really ready and anxious and desirous to answer questions. I am not going to guarantee you a brilliant answer, but I'm going to tell you you're going to get my best shot at it, and with God's help, will be some real value here. So any of you like to ask a question about visioneering, about vision, about mind management, about our thinker of thoughts? What could I do to be of service to you? Yes.
Who are your typical clients for visioneering?
Who are my typical clients? There's kind of two levels of visioneering. One, we call it destination thinking for leaders. And that I teach to high-level corporate leaders, the people who are leading the people. Then what I teach to the rank and file, we call it visioneering, which is how each one of us within the corporate vision create a vision of how we can help develop our talents and abilities within, as we help fulfill the vision of the corporation. So sometimes I get to work with the CEO and their top people, and that's destination thinking for leaders. And then once they get the vision defined, then as we roll it out, then we call it visioneering, and we present the vision that the CEO, C-level people have developed, and then ask the people to visualize that, and then their role in helping to bring that about. Not dissimilar to the model we have in the church. We've got the prophet who's got the vision, but on the local level, stake presidents and bishops and quorum presidents and parents, they get to now take those and create their vision within the framework of that overall structure. Okay, so the question, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat the question. You don't even know what, the question was, who do we teach visioneering to? And there's really two levels of it. Sometimes I get the luxury of speaking in some cherry-paneled boardrooms to some pretty high-powered people. I never tell them that I'm a retired dentist. That doesn't impress them. Yes.
How did you make the transition from being a dentist to this?
How did I make the transition from being a dentist to doing this? I can't tell you why, but from the time I was a little guy, I felt like I needed to be a dentist. I think I actually, when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up, I can't remember a time when I didn't say dentist. But in the process of getting my dental education, I had an encounter with a speech teacher that changed my life. She said, I think you have a gift in speaking. Okay, I went away to dental school and was a happy practicing dentist, but in the 1980s, dentists were leading the field in a lot of very inadmirable categories: depression, suicide, divorce, alcoholism. And it was really because of their thought processes. So I thought I could serve my fellow dentists by presenting a professional seminar for dentists only and I called it Dental Practice with Peace of Mind. One day was on dental practice management principles, and the other day was on what I called mind management. Now this will shock some of you, but your dentists have friends. And some of these friends are not dentists, and so I started getting calls from people who were not dentists saying, my dentist friend is raving about this seminar you teach. We don't want in my company the dental part of it, but we could use this mind part of it. In 1986, I got a call, I'll never forget this man's name, from William H. Doan. He was an executive in the fibers division of E.I. DuPont de Nemours, DuPont. And he said, my dentist is raving about this mind management stuff. He says, I think we need it here at DuPont. He says, I'm going to put together a seminar. I'm going to have upper-level management, mid-level management, rank-and-file people. There'll be 50 people in the room. You come back and teach your mind management stuff. And then if we like it, we'll roll it out. Well, I went home. I went there, and I guess I hit my home run, and they rolled it out there. And then the message traveled from DuPont to Motorola in Phoenix. Got a call from a man by the name of Gino Ori, senior vice president there. Same thing reenacted. And pretty soon, I've got this tiger by the tail. And this will sound strange to some of you. I was born in the church, but my father was very inactive, and there was never a family home evening in my home. I don't ever remember a family prayer. We didn't even have any scriptures in our home till I was 14. But I got into the mission field, and I found that my companions had something called a patriarchal blessing. I had, to my knowledge, I could never remember even hearing about one. So back in my day, they didn't promote it a lot, and I went out in the mission field without a patriarchal blessing. And then when my companions would read me theirs, they all sounded kind of the same. That if you're righteous and live the commandments, you'll find the right girl, you're going to get married in the temple, you go, rise in the morning, first resurrection, and oh, by the way, you're a member of this tribe. So I couldn't figure out why you needed one. Because it seemed like if I didn't obey the commandments, and the patriarchal blessing said, if you obey the commandments, I wouldn't get the blessing. And even if the patriarchal blessing didn't say, if I did keep the commandments, I would get the blessing. So I couldn't. So I'm about 33 now, and I'm feeling very restless, feeling like something's missing. And I was actually a member of the stake presidency at that time, and I called up, my wife said, well, why don't you go get your patriarchal blessing? And as a member of the stake presidency, I called up my patriarch and said, I'd like to make an appointment for a patriarchal blessing. He said, you can't have more than one. I said, I don't want more than one. I just want one. I haven't had mine yet. He laughed. He thought I was kidding him. Anyway, in my patriarchal blessing, there are 14 paragraphs. 11 of them talk about teaching. One of them says, you will develop methods of teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and such that people around the world will inquire after the church. And so I knew that I wasn't going to stay in dentistry, that I needed to follow this corporate training. And with the support of a wonderful, wonderful wife, full of faith, we gave up a pretty sure and steady income to start a fledgling company, and we wound up here in Laie talking to you today. Long story. I've got one fault in my teaching. Any question worth answering is worth over-answering in my book. So that's how I got here. It became apparent that Heavenly Father had led me to dentistry so that I could understand medical terms and engineering and physics and so forth, so that I could read studies, convert them into language, combine them with the knowledge of the scriptures, and then teach concepts that everybody could understand in corporate or public seminars. And that's really what I love doing. I get to teach the gospel, so to speak, every day, but I don't get to wear a black name tag. And I don't get to always let them know what the source of the material is. Okay. Yes. One more question. Yes, way at the back.
I was wondering, it's easy to get distracted with everything going on nowadays. How do you keep focused on that vision? What methods do you suggest, for example, to keep that vision in mind at all times?
I'm not able to really hear you.
How do you keep that vision in mind with all
With all the distractions? Okay, great. How do you keep your vision in mind? Okay, you've got to take steps of tuning out the world from time to time. Not entirely necessarily, but you need to know that I watch very little TV. When I'm driving back and forth to work, I might listen to the news broadcast, but then I also have the conference addresses on there. You've got to make your vision your dominant thought. That means that you need to repeat it regularly, you need to spend time on it, and you need to invest it with the joy of the moment, of achieving it. In other words, every Olympic athlete pictures themselves accomplishing the perfect floor routine, the perfect skate on ice, the perfect vault, and they rehearse it in their head again and again. They meditate upon it. And then they see the reward that'll come from that. And that's what you want to do with your own vision. When you get up in the morning, before you get out of bed, run the mental movie of your vision. As you're drifting off to sleep, run the mental movie of your vision. Spaced repetition. I want to leave you with my testimony very simply. As was mentioned in my introduction by my beloved wife, I'm currently serving as a bishop. I want you to know I would be grateful to have any calling in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I know that it's true. I know Jesus is the Christ. I know Joseph saw the Father and the Son. I know that there really are gold plates somewhere that have Nephi's chisel marks in them. And most of all, I know that we are all God's children in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much.